By revenue, one of the very largest companies in the world is not an oil giant or a tech titan or a bank. It is an electricity company. It employs, by some counts, well over 1 million people, more than almost any other firm on earth. It serves a population of well over 1 billion. And unless you happen to live in one particular country, you will never be its customer, never see its logo, and quite possibly never hear its name. It is called State Grid, and it operates one of the most staggering machines humanity has ever assembled. This is a series about the companies that run the world and the rivals they left behind. Today it is the State Grid Corporation of China, and it is here to represent something the previous stories only hinted at: the quiet, physical, unglamorous business of electricity. We spend enormous attention on who generates power, on oil and solar and batteries. We spend almost none on the thing that carries it, the vast network that moves electricity from where it is made to the switch on your wall. That network is one of the great overlooked wonders of the world. To grasp State Grid, you first have to appreciate what an electricity grid actually is. It is arguably the largest and most complex machine ever built. It is a single, continent-spanning web that has to perform a nearly impossible trick every second of every day. Because electricity at this scale cannot easily be stored, the amount being generated must be matched almost perfectly and instantly to the amount being used across an entire nation forever. Too much or too little, and the whole thing can cascade into darkness. State Grid runs that machine for the overwhelming majority of China. It delivers power to well over 1 billion people across a territory of enormous size and dizzying variety, from dense megacities to remote countryside. The sheer scale of keeping the lights on reliably for that many human beings at once is difficult to truly comprehend. It is, in a very literal sense, one of the largest coordinated physical operations in human history, humming away quietly in the background of over 1 billion lives. Now, the very concept of competition is strange here, because a national grid is what economists call a natural monopoly. It makes no sense to build 3 or 4 competing sets of power lines to every home. The wires are shared infrastructure, like roads. So State Grid's dominance is not the result of outcompeting rivals in a marketplace. It was granted by the state as the operator of a network that is, by its very nature, meant to be a single unified system. Its power comes not from winning a contest, but from being the network itself. That said, it is not entirely alone even at home. A second, smaller state company, China Southern Power Grid, runs the network for a cluster of southern provinces. So China's grid is really split between two giants, with State Grid as the vastly larger of the two. But they are not really competitors, fighting over customers. They are more like two halves of a single national project, each a monopoly within its own enormous territory, dividing the map rather than fighting over it. But here is where State Grid becomes genuinely, globally interesting, and it comes down to a specific and formidable technology. China has a geography problem with power. Much of its energy, from giant dams and vast solar and wind farms, is generated in the remote west, while most of its people and factories are in the crowded east, sometimes thousands of kilometers away. Sending electricity that far normally wastes enormous amounts of it along the way. So State Grid became the world leader in something called ultra-high voltage transmission, essentially superhighways for electricity that can carry immense power across a continent with far smaller losses. This is not a minor engineering footnote. It is one of the genuinely important technologies for any clean energy future, because the sun and the wind are often strongest exactly where the people are not. Being able to move renewable power efficiently across vast distances is a problem much of the world is still struggling with, and State Grid has arguably deployed the solution at greater scale than anyone else alive. In this one crucial domain, the sprawling state monopoly is not a laggard. It is quietly at the frontier. And that expertise has made it something more than a domestic utility. State Grid has expanded outward, buying stakes in the electricity networks of other countries in parts of Europe, South America, and beyond. And this is where the quiet electricity company suddenly becomes a matter of national security debates in distant capitals. Because a power grid is the ultimate piece of critical infrastructure. The idea of a foreign state-owned company, owning a slice of your national grid makes a great many governments deeply and understandably nervous. So, the uncomfortable question this series keeps returning to arrives here in perhaps its most physical form yet. What does it mean for so much fundamental capability? The ability to build and run the grids that all modern life sits upon, to be concentrated in a single, state directed giant. And separately, what should any country make of the prospect of that giant coming to own pieces of the essential infrastructure inside its own borders? These are not abstract worries. They are among the quiet front lines of modern geopolitics. Now, to be fair, there is something genuinely admirable buried in this story, and it deserves saying. Reliably electrifying a nation of well over 1 billion people, including lifting its most remote and poorest regions into the modern electrical age, is one of the great logistical achievements of our century. Whatever one thinks of the politics around it, the raw feat of engineering and coordination is extraordinary. And the ultra-high voltage expertise it developed may end up being genuinely useful to a warming world that badly needs to move clean power around. And that is the deeper lesson, in one of its most physical and least glamorous forms. Beneath all the noise about oil and chips and software and money, there is a layer even more fundamental, the actual humming physical infrastructure that carries the energy everything else depends on. It attracts almost no attention, precisely because it works so quietly and so well. State Grid is a giant that runs that hidden layer for a fifth of humanity, a company you will likely never deal with, quietly operating one of the largest and most consequential machines on the face of the earth.